this is me at the Science Museum in London, in South Kensington, and this is the redone up the space display, and we're looking here at Apollo 10, Charlie Brown, and it is really a lot better displayed here now. Huge improvement on what it used to be like, the big picture about the Earth. Apollo 10 is not about the Earth, it's about President Kennedy's commitment to put a man on the moon. And it's quite spectacular. And then if I just pan around here, we've got the Russian Soyuz in comparison, and this is the capsule that the second British astronaut, Tim Peake, went to the International Space Station. He did his spacewalk, and we watched that when I watched that with Graham Dale at the Kennedy Space Center visitor complex on a big screen. Just moving round here to the Soyuz. Now, I've seen this before in here, before they made this new exhibit, and I also saw it when a number of years ago when it came to Edinburgh, and that was the first time I actually gone to Edinburgh. You can see inside the cockpit. And then you can see Soyuz and Apollo together. And of course, 51 years ago, I remember watching the Apollo Soyuz test mission. So I'm going to walk back over to Apollo 10. Okay, now Apollo 10, which was launched on May 1969, was the first live launch of a space mission that I watched on TV. And basically, my earliest memory was briefly seeing the Apollo 9 spacewalk on the TV. But from Apollo 10 onwards, I have watched every single space mission. And since STS-1, the first space shuttle mission, I have recorded every single American space flight and most Russian, and I've recorded the Chinese space program as well. I'm going to zoom in here, but it's a bit dark, so you can't really, you can just make out the couches there. So a lot of these Apollo spacecraft between the Apollo missions, though the capsules weren't reusable, the equipment inside them was reusable, and they would be cannibalized in certain parts of flying on other Apollo missions. If we look up to the top, we can just look at where the thrusters at the top there, and where the docking adapter was. So for instance, the Apollo 14, they had lots of problems with the linking up with the lunar module, and because they reused the same one again on Apollo 16, and of course the moon landing on Apollo 16 very nearly never happened because of the problems with the docking, but they did manage to get it. My great honour to actually, they're all my heroes, so my great honour to have met all three of the Apollo 10 astronauts. So we got the first one I got to meet would be John Young when he was in Edinburgh back in the 90s. We got to meet General Stafford at Pontefract, and of all the astronauts, he gave the best and the longest talk, which was really amazing. And we got to meet Gene Cernan when he was at Autographica a few years back. So I'm going to move round. So we can see here we've got a Kathleen Johnson, and Kathleen was responsible for a mathematician, and she was an amazing lady that worked out all the calculations manually, of course, at that time. And of course, John Glenn refused to, or was Alan Shepard refused to go until he checked with Kathleen that these numbers that she had computed were correct. Because there's the movie Hidden Figures and this is the book. So I've got to move round. So here we've got Margaret Hamilton, another famous lady from Project Apollo, and she did the programming of the Apollo computer. So she's a lead software engineer at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Instrumentation Laboratory. And so Margaret programmed the Apollo computer. So we can come round here and we can see this is what the instrument panel inside the Apollo command module, where the used for training, identical to what we have on the flight version. If we look at the back of Charlotte Brown, you can see the ablative heat shield, and we can see bits been burnt off there from the re-entry. Let's take that back. So in here we can see some of the equipment. If I zoom on this is Neil Armstrong's headset radio. And then we've got a very familiar object that is the Omega Moonwatch, which I've got one, and this is the first watch to be worn on the moon. In fact, NASA used it for most space missions. In fact, on Artemis 2 the other month there, the Speedmaster was flown also, along with some other more modern watches. So this is the Apollo survival radio. The command module came down somewhere because it could land on land, or so the astronauts could radio for help. So this one was manufactured in 1968. And then it's just showing you the main console of an Apollo for the training simulator. A view here of the heat shield. It's really great how they've done this. I really like this. This was displayed a lot better. So President Trump has given the go-ahead for a permanent moon base, and that was almost certainly going to be nuclear powered, as was the Apollo landers for the Apollo scientific experiment package. So this is Rolls-Royce, a leading aerospace company in the UK, and they were developing nuclear reactors and small nuclear reactors. I'm not sure if this has now been cancelled due to the usual lack of government support, but one of the most exciting things is micro nuclear power stations, so that each city could have its own mini clean nuclear power plant. It's the development of boom rovers. Now, this is the Apollo power cell. This is how the Apollo spaceship was powered. Fuel cells, whereas the Orion spacecraft uses the European Service Module, where it uses solar panels. So 3 fuel cells indicated in this picture here. So moving back round to the Soyuz, and you can see, looking at the back of Tim Peake's Capsule, and we can see the parachute, so you have some size. The Shenzhou, the Chinese spaceship, is basically identical to this, but it is scaled up. So here we've got a Helen Sharman spacesuit, and of course Helen was the first British astronaut, not Tim Peake. And I'm very proud of the fact that our Discovery Space Club in Paisley, along with John Bonser's Star Research, we put in a bid for an experiment, and we were one of, I think it was 11 experiment groups for Helen's flight in 1991. And we were wanting to do testing a Wave Rider model, but unfortunately our experiment got bumped at the last minute. I did get to talk to Helen on the phone at Star City about a week before the launch from Brunel University.
The other half is the ocean. This is because one side of TRAPPIST 1 always faces its star. Scientists think that this side will be light and warm, and the other dark and icy. Astronomers have discovered many thousands of exoplanets and keep finding more.
So we've got this giant photographic mural photograph from Apollo 17, which is quite spectacular. You can see the Challenger there, the mountains behind it. You can see the lunar rover with the Bayer television camera, made by RCA, the Bayer sequential colour system.
All of the planets in the solar system orbit the sun with huge gravitational pull holding the system together from the biggest planet itself to the smallest constellation.
So here we can see Jack Schmidt on the moon, Apollo 17. So there we see the first and only British satellite launch, Prospero, on the Black Arrow 1971. We threw away our space programme as part of Edward Heath's dirty deal to get into the European common market, the EU, the deal with the French, to sign away Scotland's fishing rights and to sign away the British space programme, because France could see in the 1970s a growing satellite market, and that is why it's an absolute disgrace Britain only ever launched one satellite, and after that we were reduced to having the Americans to do it. So we used to have an actual Black Arrow rocket in here, but unfortunately that's gone now, and all you've got basically is the spacecraft and the fairing. We do have one in Scotland, the East Fortune, but unfortunately it's because of Concorde they've run out of space and you can't get anywhere near it because it's rammed right back in the hangar. But you can see the Blue Streak rocket at a distance,